Very much, David, and thank you for not introducing me as Ariane Sherine, which I have been introduced on stage as before. So he was going, Ariane, I need to get this right. He eventually got it right by saying, "You're a man called Harry on." And so that's what I am. So thank you so much for coming here today for this Darwin Day celebration. Now, as you know, probably know, I am trying to switch the slide, but it's not going forward, which is problematic.
Oh. Don't get that.
Don't worry, we will sort it out. Imagine a picture of Darwin. Now, long beard, just like me. Darwin was born, as you probably know, on the 12th of February, 1809. But what you might not know is that he died on the 19th of April, 1882, and he lived to 73. Now, that was not a bad innings in the 18th century, 19th century. Yes, sorry. Sorry, Darwin. But I reckon I can get you closer to 100 these days with a little bit of luck. You need a little bit of luck, a little bit of genetic luck, and to do a lot of the things that I'm going to tell you in this talk. So I was a bit worried that nobody was going to turn up when I was asked to do the gig, because I thought the Venn diagram of people who wanted to know how to live to 100, but were also willing to catch COVID, possibly, would be two separate circles, 2 meters apart. But turns out they look more like this. This is you in the middle, you're orange, like Donald Trump. Now, if you don't know who the hell I am, you're thinking, who is this crazy woman? I did a little thing called the Atheist Bus Campaign about 13 years ago, which makes me feel old. That's a picture of me before Richard Dawkins told me that he only likes big girls. To put that timescale in perspective at 13 years, back then I was single and now I have a 10-year-old daughter. I should say that that had nothing to do with Richard Dawkins before he sues me. So, Richard Dawkins has this beautiful quote from this book, Unweaving the Rainbow. And he says, "We're going to die, and that makes us the lucky ones. Most people are never going to die because they are never going to be born. The potential people who could have been here in my place, but who will in fact never see the light of day, outnumber the sand grains of Arabia. Certainly, those unborn ghosts include greater poets than Keats, scientists greater than Newton. We know this because the set of possible people allowed by our DNA so massively exceeds the set of actual people. In the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I, in our ordinariness, that are here. We privileged few who won the lottery of birth against all odds." Isn't that a beautiful quote? And it does make you think that we are so lucky to be here and we need to maximize our time on earth because it is so precious. And we are really, really fortunate. And there was also, to put that very lyrical quote into more stark mathematical terms, there's a quote from Business Insider, which says, "The probability of you existing at all comes out to 1 in 10 to the power of 2,685,000, 10 followed by 2,685,000 zeros. So the odds of you being alive are basically zero." And then they give this lovely analogy in the Business Insider article. They say, imagine in all the world's oceans, all 300 cubic miles of ocean, there is one turtle. We will call him Terry or Tarquin, depending on how posh you want him to be. And in all the world's oceans, there is also one life preserver. Sorry, I'm American. Flotation device. What do we call it here? Life belt. Sorry. So my dad's American, so I've got citizenship, but I was born here, in case you can't hear. Yeah, anyway, so this is where my photoshopping skills really come into play, because the chances of you being alive are the same as that turtle, that one turtle in all the world's oceans, coming up out of the water and putting his head through that life belt in one go. There he is. Now, turtles do not need life belts. So this would be an outrageous stroke of good fortune that is completely wasted on Terry or Tarquin. But you get my point. So now, if you want to live to 100, I have great news for you. The World Health Organization estimates that 60% of our health outcomes are within our own control. So your actions influence 60% of your health outcomes, diet, exercise, etc. So today I am going to tell you, I'm going to take you through the day in the life of somebody who's going to live to 100. And I'm going to list 25 things you can do to extend your life expectancy. So to start with, you have to wake up. If you don't wake up, you're not going to live to 100. And when should you wake up? You need to wake up after about 7 hours, because 7 is the magic number. So if you sleep more than 8 hours, you increase your risk of death by 80%. No, 30%, sorry, 30%. And if you sleep fewer than 5 hours, you increase it by 12%. And when we say increase your risk of death, obviously everybody's risk of death is 100%, right? There's nobody who gets to avoid it yet. But we also talk about life expectancy over the duration of the study. So that's what we say, mortality risk. So how many people died over the duration of the study? Often it's like 10 years. So this is bad news for me. I am a hypersomniac. I have something called hypersomnia, which means that I sleep all the time. I sleep 12 hours a night. And the doctors don't know why. I've been for blood test after blood test, etc., thyroid, anemia. I'm not going to bore you with all my medical problems, don't worry. But I think I get it from my dad. My dad used to sleep so much, we would call him our Father who art in bed. Robert be thy name. So after you wake up, you want to go to the bathroom and do your ablutions. And ablutions is an anagram of Usain Bolt. But you don't need to do them in record time. And while you're naked, you do something that I recommend you do twice a day. Can you guess what that might be? Yep, you weigh yourself. Yeah. So in studies, people who weigh themselves twice daily lose a lot more weight than people who weigh themselves once or not at all. Probably because it makes you feel really guilty and you can't imagine that you're skinny when you're not. Also, measure your waist, because your waist measurement is a very good indicator of your overall health. And the waist measurement for a man should be 37 inches or under, and for a woman, 31.5 inches or under. The Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, say that 40% of all cancers are associated with overweight and obesity. That's, yeah, all cancers diagnosed, which is pretty shocking. Obesity comes second only to smoking in terms of preventable causes of cancer. Now, I recognize the irony of me standing here weighing 14 stone and telling you this, right? I'm only 5'2". This is like Donald Trump giving you a lecture on kindness and empathy, or Prince Andrew on doing right by your family. But I have lost almost a stone in the past month. I'm doing it by doing a YouTube video series and weighing in on camera every week, which is shaming me into it. It is cheaper than Slimming World, but understand if you don't want to stand in your pants and bra in the mirror, especially if you're a bloke. So it, on camera, but it's not for everybody, but it's working for me. So next, you go downstairs to the kitchen and you make yourself not a tape measure, but a nice cup of coffee. And coffee reduces your mortality risk. Now, 4 cups of coffee a day reduces your mortality risk by 16% for women and 12% for men. And don't worry if coffee makes you go, and you can't handle the caffeine, because apparently it doesn't matter. Apparently decaf is just as good as caffeinated coffee. And also, coffee snobs, like coffee connoisseurs that like to have their coffee, excreted through a goat's rectum and filtered with, all the rest of it. Anyway, apparently their coffee is no better extending life than like Tesco Instant. So don't worry about shelling out, 4 quid a cup. I was going to the weight loss clinic a few months ago, and I grabbed a coffee from Pret on the way in, go in, and the woman checks my temperature, and she said, any coffee or anything? I said, oh, no, I've already got one. She said, no. I said, any coughing or anything? Do you have COVID symptoms? So that's very embarrassing. Coffee's so good for you because it contains all these plant compounds called phytochemicals, and they are extremely good for you. So if you don't like coffee, if you're like, oh, it tastes disgusting, then you're crazy, but that's fine. You can always drink green tea instead. Now, green tea is also a life extender. They did a study of 100,000 Chinese people last year, and the people who drank at least 3 cups of green tea a week lived a 1.5 years longer on average than those who didn't. And coffee also is not green tea. Green tea, I'm sorry, guys. We are talking about green tea. And there we go. It looks like urine, doesn't it? And it tastes quite disgusting. But it's really good for you. Only 3 cups a week. And I don't know if that can be sort of extrapolated outward. So I don't know if, for instance, 6 cups a week make you live 3 years longer. It'd be interesting to know. So then you want to have a kind of Zen meditation session. I use an app called Balance, and they're currently offering a year free, and that sounds like I'm selling something. I'm really not. If you just search for Balance on the App Store, then that's what I do every day. And I only do it for 10 minutes a day, but I have noticed that it makes me feel calmer. And studies seem to back up that it increases life expectancy by 23%. And nobody really knows how it works, but studies show it changes the structure of your brain and helps you retain gray matter as you age. And it's also been proven to rival antidepressants when it comes to combating anxiety, although antidepressants lessen it a bit and meditation lessens it a bit, basically. So after you have meditated, your spouse comes downstairs, and I'm sure they're just as hot as that. And being married will make you live longer, although most of the time it'll just feel like that. It's very important, though, that you are happily married, because a toxic marriage will, of course, shorten your life. And what's really interesting is that you've probably seen some studies, right, that say that marriage extends life for men and shortens it for women. Well, and apparently it has something to do with age gap marriages. Now, men with younger wives or partners seem to, live longer than men who have partners the same age or older. But with women, it doesn't matter how big the age gap is, their life expectancy will reduce proportionately to that. So, you know, no toy boys for you. So I'm just warning. So next you go on to have breakfast, and people who eat 10 portions of fruit and veg a day live longest. Now, in some countries, they do advocate eating 10 portions of fruit and veg a day, but they know that Brits are shit at eating fruit and veg. So they've kind of thought, let's not push our luck. Public Health England thought, you know, let's stick to 5, but one of them can't be potatoes, because if it's potatoes, you'll just eat chips and crisps, right? So you can't have more than one of the same thing. So if you really like mangoes, you can't just have 5 mangoes. So you have to have a wide variety, and you also should mix it up with regard to fruit and veg. So for instance, if you're having 10 a day, which is a lot, that's 800 grams, then you need to maybe have 6 or 7 of them be veg, rather than like 8 of them be fruit, because veg is slightly better for you than fruit. You also want to have different colors, because the different colors correspond to different nutrients. Now, a lot of people might say, I don't like fruit and veg, they taste horrible, I can't be asked eating them. Can I not just take a multivitamin instead and get all my vitamins and nutrients that way? And the answer is probably not. There was a famous study on beta carotene. Now, beta carotene is an orange nutrient that's found in like orange fruit, so, and veg, so like orange peppers, papayas, apricots, carrots, you get the picture. So what they wanted to see was if beta carotene in pill form worked just as well, because they know that beta carotene in vegetable and fruit form decreases your likelihood of getting lung cancer. So what they did was they took this group of heavy smokers who were most at risk of getting lung cancer, and they made them eat pills every day, beta carotene pills. And unfortunately, the results showed that the beta carotene tablets increased their risk of getting lung cancer. So, oh dear. So it could either do nothing, and because the vitamin pills basically have what's called low bioavailability, which means comes out in your wee and poo. Yeah, so you either don't absorb it, and you kind of excrete it all out, or it can be counterproductive, as in this example. So the only supplements that I take are vitamin D, which everybody should take in the winter because it's bloody horrible, and you make vitamin D by sunlight and we don't get any. So the NHS advocates that you take it in the winter. And if you're brown, you should take it all year round, because we contain too much melanin, so we don't absorb the sun's rays in the same way. So we don't actually make vitamin D as easily. So you are having breakfast, which could be a vegan pan-fried breakfast with reduced sugar and salt, baked beans and mushrooms and tomatoes, and that's 3 of your 5 a day. And you could have a veggie sausage or 2 and some seeded bread. You could also have a load of berries and nuts in porridge. So then your kid comes downstairs and probably throws all the breakfast all over the floor. Now, having kids, it's really interesting. Having kids makes women live 18 months longer and makes men live 2 years longer. And we don't really know why. We think that it could give you an extra sense of purpose and fulfillment. Doesn't actually make you any happier. Well, it's made me happier, but you know, your mileage may vary. So breastfeeding also reduces the risk of breast cancer in women, and we know that nuns have very high rates of breast cancer, and that's hypothesized to be because they don't have kids and they don't breastfeed. But on the plus side, they don't get cervical cancer because that is caused by a virus in sperm. So yeah, unless it's a very naughty nun. So next, you run to work. Because the more exercise you do, the longer you will live with no upper limit. So people who do ultra marathons will live longer than people who just do marathons. I say just do marathons. I can't even run down to the post box. I mean, that may be because these people who do ultra marathons need to have all their joints replaced and they end up 95% bionic. So that'd see you living longer. So obviously exercise works your muscles, it makes them stronger, including your heart muscle, increases your cardiorespiratory fitness, and it can also decrease your heartbeat. And a slower heartbeat is linked to longevity because you're not wearing your heart muscle out. So my co-author in this book, who's a consultant in public health, he said that if you take one thing from this book, it is to exercise like your life depends on it, because it does. So you run to work, and what you don't do is drive to work. It's very childish, I'm sorry about that. You don't drive to, oh God, I'm pathetic. You don't drive to work because 1 in 77 people will die driving a car, which is over 1%. And 1 in 301 people will die as the passenger in a car. So hands up if you've been in a car crash. Yeah, it's about 40% of us. So it is a dangerous thing. But if you do have to get in a car, the best place is in the back at the middle, although that's not recommended if you're driving the car. So you get to work and you have a very well-paid and high-status job, my friends, because the better paid and higher status your job is, the lower your risk of certain diseases and the less likely you are to die prematurely. And I'm guessing that's partly because affluence means that you can afford better healthcare. And so if there are long NHS waiting lists, then you can go private. Job security means better mental health. Having a job gives you a sense of purpose, and also seeing colleagues decreases loneliness, and loneliness is one of the biggest killers. So at work, you have a standing desk, and you know that each extra hour of standing increases your life expectancy by 5% on average. Now, I know that a lot of you are retired, so the main thing for you is that you don't lose your sense of purpose. The Japanese have a word for sense of purpose, and they call it ikigai. No, that's not right. It is ikigai. There's a very strong link between retirement and imminent death in the Western world, which doesn't exist in Japan. And that's because the Japanese make sure that they stay very active in their communities. They see lots of people, they do lots of gardening, and they retain their ikigai, so they retain their sense of purpose. And they feel needed and wanted, and they have a reason to get up in the morning, which is vital. They also see lots of people so they don't get lonely. But the fictional you in my presentation isn't retired yet. They're still at work. And somebody does a tea run, and they ask you if you want a cup of tea, and you say yes, because black tea is still good for you. It's not as good as green tea because the oxidization process is, it goes through this fermentation process, and oxygen reacts with the enzymes in the leaves. And this results in a loss of catechins and polyphenols. And those are the things that make you live longer. But black tea can lower your LDL cholesterol, which is your bad cholesterol, and it can reduce your risk of cancer and stroke. And when I started doing the tea run at my last workplace, I didn't really know what I was doing because I didn't really drink tea or make tea, but I thought that I should show willing. So one day I got up at this big media organization and I said to everybody in my department, would you like some tea? Would you like some tea? A few people said yes. And I went over to my boss. He was wearing headphones and I didn't want to disturb him. So I did a mime of what I thought was tea. So I said, would you like some tea? And he just stared at me and he took his headphones off and he said, "What?" And I said, "Would you like some tea?" And he went, "No, Ariane, that is not tea. This is tea." So that told me. So next it's lunchtime and you could eat some sushi and salad. Now the Japanese, as well as having their ikigai, they also have the longest life expectancy of any people on the planet. And that's partly because they eat a lot of sushi, because fish is really, really good for you. There was a study, mainly of Seventh-day Adventists, where they compared 4 different diets. They compared people who ate meat infrequently, people who were pescatarian, so ate fish, people who were vegetarian, and people who were vegan. And they found that the pescatarians came out at the top, followed by the vegans, then the vegetarians, and then lastly, the meat eaters. So I reckon that clearly a vegetarian diet is not as healthy as a vegan diet. So the dairy and possibly the eggs make you live less long than the vegans. So I reckon if you were vegan and you ate fish twice a week, you'd be living forever. So this is my theory. We know that there are these zones around the world called the blue zones, and those are the areas where they have the longest life expectancy. And all the blue zones are islands. There's the island of Okinawa in Japan. There's the Mediterranean islands of Icaria in Greece and Sardinia in Italy. And what these islands all have in common is obviously they're surrounded by sea. So there's a lot of fishing and a lot of eating of fresh fish. And it's good for you. It reduces inflammation. It reduces your chance of abnormal heart rhythms. The only downside is that they can contain high levels of heavy metals, such as mercury. So if you're pregnant, you're not meant to eat that much fish. And if you look at the chart of fish, like if there was like a heavy metal chart of fish, like maybe swordfish has the most. So that would be like the Iron Maiden of heavy metal fishes. I don't know much about. Yes, Thin Lizzy, yes. So you're having a half day today, lucky you, because you are going on holiday. You are going on a mini break to the seaside with your spouse and some friends, and your parents are looking after your kid. And this is great because the more social connections and relationships you have, the longer you live. So you leave work and you travel to the airport, but you know how dangerous cars are. So instead you take a train. And trains are very safe because you only have a 1 in 432,000 chance of dying on a train. My numbers are worse than Priti Patel's, aren't they? Like, yeah. So that is 1,435 times safer than traveling by car. So I was thinking this on the way up on the train. I was thinking, I'll probably be okay. It's going very fast. I was like, it'll probably be okay if it crashes. But just to maximize your safety, do what I did. So you want to sit traveling backwards, because if it crashes, you just go backwards into your seat, right? Then you want to make sure you sit away from the window so that you don't get thrown out by the impact and you don't get hit by broken glass. And you also want to make sure you don't sit with anybody opposite you, because if it crashes, then they'll go forwards into you. So I was sitting backwards and I thought I was going to throw up. So I had to get up and sit forwards. I was kind of weighing it up in my mind. Yeah, I feel sick, but that's better than dying. So I have suffered to get to you. So then you get on a plane to Cornwall, so you're going to Cornwall, and planes are even safer because you have a 1 in 5 million chance of dying on a plane. So they're 17,000 times safer in cars. And they've also crunched the accident statistics with planes, and they've discovered that the middle of the back row is the safest. So all you sitting in first class, you know, you need to be down the back with the rest of us. So the second safest place to sit is the toilet, because they're disgusting and spattered with piss, so nobody sits on those. Anyway, so you want to read a book on the train. Now, you know that physical books extend your life. And what you don't, oh yes, you could read my book even. It's available on Kindle. It's a very rude novel. I don't have any to sell tonight because I forgot them, but it is a lot of fun. Anyway, what you don't want to do is watch telly on the plane, because TV what's the opposite of extends? Contracts, reduces, shortens your life expectancy. And we don't know why. So what they did this experiment because they thought, okay, obviously TV is going to reduce your life expectancy because you're just sitting still, right? So they made people run on treadmills to divorce the TV watching from being sedentary, and they still reduced their life expectancy. So, which is a real shame because I love films and I love telly, and you know, but reading books is just as much fun. And I don't just say that because I write them, because I did used to write telly. But we don't really know why reading extends your life. We think it's the way that you process the text, and you form images in your brain, and television watching is thought to be a bit more passive. But again, that's just conjecture. So you arrive at your destination. You've got a hotel, and it's got lots of lovely leafy plants in the foyer, and that is good because the more nature you immerse yourself in, the longer you live. So get out in the garden, do some gardening, get among the plants, and then you have dinner in the restaurant. You make sure you have lots of different colors on your plate. Then you go up to your room with your spouse, and it's sexy time. And weirdly, the optimum frequency of sex is twice a week. Any less or any more, and it's not as good. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's a bit of a chore to do it more than twice a week if you've been in a relationship for a long time. My longest relationship was 3 years and I still wanted it, but you know, I don't know. I won't ask you. I won't. The last time I had sex with my ex in Leeds, and I asked him to talk dirty to me, and he said, "Hurry up and come, I ain't got all day," which was not quite what I had in mind. So in the morning, you wake up and your spouse, oh yes, you weigh yourself. Your spouse is still asleep. So you decide to go for your usual run, and you're feeling super smug because you're doing everything right and you're on course to live to 100, and you're lost in your own thoughts about how great you are. So much so that you don't see the atheist bus coming around the corner. And it hits you and you die and you go absolutely nowhere, proving that the bus is right and that there is no God. And this also proves that you can lead as healthy and ascetic a life as possible, but you could still die an untimely death, because we can control 60% of our health outcomes, right? But 20% is our genes, which means that we could have a faulty mutation, which curtails our life through no fault of our own. And then 20% is sheer luck. And I always think of this poor guy who was walking down Camden High Street, where I used to live, And he was a lawyer. He was getting married. He had his whole life ahead of him. He was in his 20s. And the sign from the William Hill betting shop fell off the shop and landed on him, and he died. And when I gave this talk in Canterbury, a bloke yelled out from the audience, "What are the odds?" So to recap, here are 25 things you can do daily to increase your chances of living a long life. So you sleep less than 8 hours, but more than 5. You weigh yourself twice a day and you stay within the healthy BMI range. You measure yourself twice a day too. You drink coffee. You drink green tea. You drink black tea. You're going to the toilet a lot by this point. You meditate. You get married. You have, yes, it does look a bit like a vagina, doesn't it? Never mind. You have at least one kid. You eat fiber, you eat nuts, you eat 10 portions of fruit and veg a day, or at least 8, I'd say. You run, you avoid cars. You take trains, buses, or planes instead, they're much safer. You work in a secure, well-paid job, chance would be a fine thing. You retain your sense of purpose, your ikigai. You stand up for much of the day. You go vegan, but you also eat fish twice a week. You hang out with friends and family. You read physical books. You avoid watching television. You immerse yourself in nature. You have sex twice a week, but no more. And you avoid being hit by the atheist bus or any bus. Now, these are 25 of the 100 things listed in the book. So to find out the other 75, please do buy it. I remember that reading physical books increases your life expectancy. Also, the RRP for this book is 15 quid, but I am selling them for only £10, and I will write whatever you want within reason. So I'm going to wear a mask for the signings, because if I die of COVID after giving this talk, that would be extremely ironic. And my obituary would have to read, Ariane Sherine, author of How to Live to 100, has died aged 41. Thank you very much.